Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast, IDP edition. I'm Jon Macri. And as we get set for the 2024 fantasy football season, one of the key exercises we can do in our prep work is identifying the players who are going to have a breakout potential, right? Or can take their game to the next level, often outperforming their current draft stock and past production. And that is exactly what we're going to do today by finding some IDP breakouts for this season. So let's get it. All right, another one of my favorite topics to cover every offseason, IDP breakout candidates. And to find these breakout candidates, I had to get a brilliant mind to sort through the many possible players with the potential to take their game to another level. Someone who operates on that other level at all times from Dynasty League football, the amazing Jase Abbey. Jase, what is up, my man?
I'm doing good, really good, John. Kind words. Thank you very much. Really excited to talk about these breakouts with you. It's, as I mentioned to you pre-show, one of my favorite topics to talk about at this point in this season. As you know, correctly identifying these guys can make all the difference as we try and bring home that elusive fantasy championship. So yeah, I can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, this is always a fun one, right? Because these are guys that, they haven't necessarily delivered from a fantasy perspective yet. Some of them have to an extent, but we're expecting them to be even better this year, and kind of pump their tires a little bit, get a little excitement around some of these guys that we're expecting big things from, and can hopefully deliver for us. Last year, we had a pretty good list of names that came through for us: the Ernest Jones and Kyle Hamilton, Azeez Al-Shaair, Kyle Duggar, Christian Barmore, Trent McDuffie, Nate Hobbs. Like we had a lot of names that we had last year that ended up having the best seasons of their career. So we're going to hope to do the same again this year, Jase. That's basically the name of the game here, is to find those next guys. So like I said, essentially looking for players who have a chance to deliver, at the very least, starter quality production for IDP, potentially even more than that for some of these players. We're not using rookies. I think that's cheating a little bit as far as breakouts go. So, Jase, what do you say we get into this damn thing, kick things off right away with some interior defensive linemen, and one of your picks here at the top from the Green Bay Packers heading into year 3. Tell us your first 2024 IDP breakout candidate.
Yeah, my first guy is Packers DT Devontae Wyatt. He really impressed me in his sophomore year. He started the season kind of third in the pecking order in that heavy rotation that Joe Barry employed at the DT spot. But by the end of the year, he played well enough to sneak ahead of TJ Slayton in snap share, finished the season with 45 pressures and 7 sacks. They're pretty good raw numbers, aren't they? And he finished the season really strongly as well, closing out the year with 4 sacks in his last 6 games. And that kind of in-season progression, that development, is always something that I like to see, especially with these younger guys that are still kind of finding their feet. Now, when you look at his underlying metrics, it gets even more interesting. He was 14th, I think, amongst all interior defensive linemen in win rate. And this kind of surprised me a little bit. 5th in pressure rate, beating guys like Dexter Lawrence, Justin Madubuike, and so on. So that's pretty damn interesting when you consider where Wyatt is going relative to some of those other guys I mentioned in fantasy drafts right now. Looking ahead to 2024, he's got a new DC in Jeff Hafley from Boston State. Changes in, defensive scheme sometimes creates an element of doubt, I suppose, about how these guys will be used. But we know Wyatt's a versatile guy. He was able to line up in multiple positions along that D line for the Packers. He's adaptable too. He's played in 2 different schemes at Georgia, and then again coming into the NFL with Barry. And the Packers have been talking him up, which is always nice to see. It's kind of like the icing on the cake, saying how he's going to kind of thrive in that scheme that simplifies their responsibilities for those defensive linemen. I just like how the stars are aligning for him, John. He's already kind of started to demonstrate his potential. He's going to continue to be given every opportunity to do what he does best, rushing the passer. And I think he can kind of take that momentum he started to gather last year and deliver a breakout year for us in 2024. What say you?
Yeah, I really like his chances. Like you said, I mean, the underlying metrics are amazing for him, right? 80.4 pass rush grade as well, 12th at the position, and then a 9.8% quick pressure rate. So getting a pressure in 2.5 seconds or less. That was the fourth best mark at the position. So, with all of that, he ends up at the top 20 at his position in expected sacks from this past season, with only 552 total snaps, right? Like that ranked 50th at the position. So, like you said, it took him a little bit of time to move up the depth chart there, but I could imagine we'll see Green Bay utilize him a little bit more here in year 3, like even if it's just more as a pass rusher to start, because he was a beast, but 305 pass rush snaps despite playing every game, ranked outside the top 50 at his position as well. 246 run defense snaps, that ranked 40th. He wasn't great as a run defender, 46.4 run defense grade. Obviously, his calling card was his pass rushing. But that was something that he did consistently grade well at in college at Georgia as well, was as a run defender as well. So, I think there's definitely room for growth there, and then getting just more snaps overall will make him a better IDP producer too, and create a better production floor. So he was DT 39 overall last year in our scoring, DT 48 in points per game. So yeah, I'm with you. I have to believe he'll get more work this season alongside Kenny Clark, another guy who Green Bay kind of eased in as a starter, but even he wasn't putting up pass rush metrics like Devontae Wyatt did in year 2. So yeah, I really like the potential here. This is a great call.
Why, thank you.
Let's go to my first pick here for a breakout year at defensive tackle, also out of Georgia. It's Jalen Carter of the Philadelphia Eagles. So Jalen Carter, I've said this a few times this offseason. I really do think he had like a legitimate argument for defensive rookie of the year last year, even over Will Anderson. Again, Will Anderson was amazing, but doing what Jalen Carter did at a arguably more difficult position, 9.9% quick pressure rate, 12.7% pressure rate, 17.7% pass rush win rate. Like he's basically putting up top 10 numbers along with the 85.9 pass rush grade, which was 6th in the NFL. I mean, the metrics for Jalen Carter hitting the ground running in the NFL was pretty impressive. I think even for a top 10 pick, like you still love to see like him delivering at that level so quickly. And then, yeah, he finished in the top 10 in expected sacks as well, which for those that maybe haven't heard me talk about expected sacks previously and don't know what it is, it's just basically it's been the most predictive and sticky metric that I've been able to come up with, even more than just playing time or any other pass rush metrics for both defensive tackles and for edge rushers. So for Carter, getting in that top 10 in expected sacks as a rookie, really insanely impressive as far as I'm concerned. Now, from that perspective, like if you're just looking at his underlying metrics and everything that he was able to accomplish from an NFL level, you could absolutely say that he's already broken out in NFL terms, perhaps, right? But from a fantasy perspective, like there's, I think, plenty of meat left on the bone here, right? Because he only averaged 7 points per game, finished as the DT 47 in our preferred scoring, which you'll be able to find the link to that in the episode description as well, to see the full list of scores and everything there. But I think there's a deep projection expected for him here, because I have him ranked as DT 14 heading into 2024. And part of the reason that I think he'll kind of be capable of those heights is not just to do with his expected sacks and all the pass rush metrics that I laid out for him in his rookie season, but there's also more room for the Eagles to rely on him this coming season as well, similarly to Devontae Wyatt, right? So 407 pass rush snaps, that was better than what we got from Wyatt, but still just 28th at the position, and then just 155 run defensive snaps, which ranked 100th at the position. So you consider the talent, another year in the system, I think it's more than fair to assume that those numbers increase in 2024. And if they do, that plays a huge part of what he can bring to the table as an IDP. So only 23 years old as well. I feel like we're just scratching the surface of what Carter could be in the NFL. And I think, from a pure production standpoint, 2024 will be the first kind of true start of that for his career.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on this one, Jon. I mean, I get plenty of things wrong. We all do, but I loved Carter
Yeah.
going into 2023, and especially from a fantasy perspective, I was willing to overlook some of the off field concerns, maybe again from a fantasy perspective, the poor conditioning at his pro day, and he got into trouble too. But what really caught my eye this time last year, I suppose, was when his position coach at Georgia, whose name I forget, but he'd been the position coach for Jordan Davis and aforementioned Devontae White, and he said that Carter combined the best of both players in in just one guy. Davis's ability as a run stuffer and Wyatt as a disruptive force on passing downs. I think he was maybe exaggerating a little bit as talking about Carter as a run defender there, but as you pointed out, what really stood out was his pass rush ability last year. It was frustrating as hell, I think, at times that he didn't play more than he did, because as good as he was when he was on the field, he didn't have that snap volume that he really deserved. But Fletcher Cox is gone, as I think you mentioned there. Vic Fangio's come in, and we saw what guys like Christian Wilkins and Zach Sealer did last year as pass rushers. Both had career years with Fangio there as the DC. So for all those reasons that you mentioned and the reasons I just mentioned there, yeah, I can't wait to see Carter this year.
Yeah, this is I'm definitely excited about him. Like, if his pass rush metrics remain anything close to what they were as a rookie, and then on a larger sample size of snaps too, like this could absolutely be a huge year here for Jalen Carter. But since we love these defensive tackles so much, let's add in another one. Jase, you have another highly drafted rookie from last season as your next pick on the breakout list. Tell us about why you like Tampa Bay Buccaneers interior defensive lineman Kalijah Cansey.
Yeah, Kenzie, I had high hopes for him too this time last year. He came into the league undersized compared to most DTs, and that did lead to concerns about how he would stack up against those bigger offensive linemen, especially in the run game. And I think those reservations were justified, as we kind of did see him struggle a little bit in that respect. But I think we also saw glimpses of that kind of otherworldly athleticism and burst for a guy of his size that makes him such a threat as a pass rusher. And it's that ability that makes him appealing for IDP purposes. His pressure rate and his win rate weren't mind-blowing, but he was a rookie, and he plays in a position where typically, unless you're Jalen Carter, it does take time for those first-year guys to make an impact. That said, I'm kind of encouraged by how he finished the season, just especially during those playoffs. His two best performances, arguably, of the season came against the Eagles in the wild card round and the Lions in the divisional round. I think on the whole, it was really encouraging to see him do what he did, especially when you consider that he missed almost the entirety of training camp with a calf injury, and then I think he re-injured it again in week 1. So yeah, going into year 2 healthy in the same scheme alongside sort of Vita Vea, I think Kansas has a lot of upside. Where do you stand on him?
Yeah, I like Cansey quite a bit as a prospect, and for his mostly for his pass rushing potential, right? Like that, I'm 100% with you. The thing I was kind of worried about him coming out of Pitt was the size and being able to hold up on rundowns and kind of be effective in that role for kind of optimal IDP potential, I guess. And year 1, it definitely kind of highlighted some of those concerns, and not to say that he can't grow into it or anything, but there was at least that kind of roadblock there for him in the NFL. And part of being an every down player and having IDP potential is being able to be a run defender for some of these defensive linemen as well. But I mean, yeah, so 29.8 run defense grade, that ranked 141st out of 142 qualifying defensive tackles. We talked about, Jalen Carter and the Eagles not deploying him a ton on rundowns. This was similarly true about Cansey last year. Did get a little bit more work on rundowns, but still not a lot. 76th at the position there, and then 381 pass rush snaps was 35th. So I don't know that he's going to still get those opportunities in year 2. Like, they got some big dudes on the interior there that they could rely on rundowns, right? Vita Vea, Greg Gaines specifically. But like, I again, like the pass rush upside, like you laid out, I think there's a ton of room there for potential as him as a big play specialist, right? And I think, an increase in his production this year because of that pass rush upside alone is something that we can kind of expect from him in year 2 and get that growth. And then as he kind of develops as a run defender too, then that only increases his floor a little bit as well, getting those opportunities to play on early downs and rack up some tackle opportunities. Because DT 41 in points per game last year, there's absolutely room there for him to improve upon that this year. And I'm with you. I like his chances quite a bit.
Yeah. With Wyatt and with Cansey, actually, what I like is that, and I like this in a lot of my fantasy DTs, is they do spend a lot of time in that sort of 3-tech alignment. And the same is true for the vast majority of DTs, unless you're sort of Dexter Lawrence, I guess. Right. So yeah, I kind of like that about him. And I don't remember, I can't remember the details. I should have made a note about it, but I think Cansey's average depth of tackle was something incredible. It's not all that fantasy relevant, I suppose. But it was just another string to his bow, another reason why I think he has the ability to succeed. I think he was like the tops of all DTs.
Okay.
You probably know. You probably know more.
Yeah.
We can probably look it up.
Yeah, I'm sure I could look it up as I'm kind of talking here. But I mean, that is something that you might see from a player like that, right? Where they are so quick at winning off the snap, right? Where they're in the backfield or they're right at the running back within like a split second, essentially. Like that makes a huge difference in them being able to kind of get those tackles right away. He was among player or defensive interior players with at least 20% of snaps. I don't know why there's a few players that aren't loading at the top, but he's right there after Dalvin Tomlinson in 7th with an, oh no, you know why? Because I'm in the postseason.
I've done you no favors by not arming myself.
There he is. Yeah, he was tied for first in the regular season with Tyre Tart of the Houston Texans. So 0.2 average depth of tackle against the run last year for Kalijah Cansey, right? So again, to give him more opportunities, maybe he could get a little bit stronger there, get used to the NFL competition. He's already so quick at winning at the line of scrimmage that, again, that potential only increases for him as the years go on. So liking that call quite a bit as well. Okay, last of the defensive linemen and our only edge on the list, surprisingly, but don't fret, folks. I'll be writing up my favorite defensive lineman breakout candidates for PFF.com next week as well, and I'll have a few more edges on there. We're just giving a taste in this episode for some of our personal favorites, and one of those guys for me is New York Jets edge Jermaine Johnson. Arguably a player who did break out in a way in 2023. He finished as edge 18 overall, edge 23 in points per game. But for me, I think Johnson's capable and will have the opportunity to kind of take his game to another level in 2024. I had this conversation with someone in our YouTube comments about Jermaine Johnson from last episode, I think it was, when I was going over my defensive line rankings, because I have him as DL13 heading into this year, which absolutely might seem high, right, on the surface. But part of my rationale there is that every single year, we see new players make their way into the top 12 IDP scorers at the position. And a couple of those, highly drafted guys, whether it was Brian Burns last year or TJ Watt the year before, that some of those guys fall out, right? There's always going to be room for new guys to come in, like a Jonathan Cooper or a Carl Granderson, to come out of left field, hit those new heights in production. And when I'm looking at who's this year's version of that and who that could be, while also kind of staying in that range for more than just one season, my personal favorite is Jermaine Johnson. He had a reasonable expected sack total. It was among the top 30 at the position in what was really his rookie year, because he barely played in 2022. And, to be fair, Johnson, he was one of those first round picks who I don't think we would expect him to hit the ground running just based on his college profile. I had him as a 74th percentile prospect, which was fine. But a lot of that came from just kind of having this every down ability, specifically as a run defender, where his pass rush needed a little bit more work. And then now entering year 3, it's about where I'd expect him to really start to deliver on that pass rush potential after flashing it in 2023. So 56 total pressures, 7.5 sacks, and a good start with his pass rush grade, 73.7, win rate 12.4%, pressure rate 13.3%. So good numbers for sure, but plenty of room for improvement as well. And experience and playing time are going to play a big part of that here in 2024, I'd imagine. So the Jets, they definitely have options at edge now, bringing in Hassan Reddick, but also having previously spent first round capital on Will McDonald as well. Like I think Will McDonald's in for a larger role, but considering just Johnson's experience now with the team, and who the hell knows what's going on with Hassan Reddick right now, but Johnson is the clear favorite, I think, to me, to lead this group in snaps, both as a pass rusher and on rundowns because of that run defense ability. And in turn, I think should lead them in production as well, right? So, you factor in a potential leap in his pass rush metrics, which we often get in year 3 and 4 for these types of players, specifically first rounders, then that's kind of what gives me the most confidence in him delivering that breakout, potentially top 12 edge season for IDP this year.
Yeah, I like Johnson. Honestly, though, I don't have a ton of shares of him on my fantasy teams. It's not that I don't really like him as a player. I thought he'd become a very capable, do-it-all kind of guy. You mentioned there, he was kind of like a well-rounded prospect. Didn't have crazy potential in my eyes in any one area, but he was that kind of guy that could be a very reliable, like you say, 3-down guy. It was really the Jets' tendency to roll out sort of 3, 4, sometimes 5 guys at that edge spot in a really heavy rotation that was kind of putting me off initially.
Right.
But as you said, last year, his role grew significantly, kind of came into his own. We started to see what he's capable of. But really, John, when we're talking about him being a breakout this year, I wonder whether we're talking about his role increasing any more than it is, or whether we think he's going to become more efficient. Because I've got to say, if I think he had the similar season this year to what he had last year, that would be a successful outcome for him. And I'm struggling to see where we're going to see that huge jump from. Like I say, he'd still be a very valuable IDP asset in leagues that start 2 to 3 defensive linemen, but I'm not 100% sure I see him pushing on much beyond where he's at the moment, and enough to me to be call it a true breakout, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Because he did perform really well last year, right? And for me, like I think just coming with that potential increase in his pass rushing ability, and I do think there's still opportunity for a little bit more snaps there, but also just having that nice tackle production floor there, not having the guys like like a Carl Lawson there or Bryce Huff on pass downs, for example. Like there's just I think just a little bit more meat left on the bone, and then again, the pass rush metrics I thought were good, better than what I kind of expected him to be already at this point in his NFL career, especially considering the lack of experience in year 1. And he's not a guy either that I drafted a lot coming out as a rookie, but he's somebody that I'm going to probably be looking at a lot more this year for sure. Obviously having him as DL13, I think it was that I said. So I think there's that room for him, both tackle and sack wise. 7.5 sacks last year. I think that number could potentially increase as well this year. But yeah, it's not there's not like these amazing pass rush metrics right now that are there for him. But again, it's one of those things where every year we kind of see these guys take those next leaps where the year prior doesn't necessarily give us every inclination that it's going to happen. And looking at kind of the batch of players that I think can get there, Johnson was kind of my favorite of that particular group.
I hear you.
All right, let's talk a couple defensive backs now, which honestly maybe the hardest position to kind of come up with like confident breakout picks, at least in my opinion. But I like our options here, Jase, and we'll start out with your pick here from America's team, the Detroit Lions. No, it's not Brian Branch, who absolutely already broke out as a rookie, but a different defensive back for the Lions is your pick. Who do you got?
Yeah, Ifeatu Melifonwu, he's a guy that I'm really keen on this season. We didn't really expect much from him at this point last season. The Lions had just drafted Brian Branch, who you mentioned there. They had Kirby Joseph, CJ Gardner-Johnson was in town. Tracy Walker was competing for a role still, but Gardner-Johnson went down with an injury early and missed most of the year. And yeah, the Lions handed Melifonwu a bigger role at the expense, I think, of Tracy Walker late in the season. And from then on, for those last sort of 4 or 5 games, Melifonwu was on fire. The tackle efficiency wasn't quite there, but in terms of the big plays, I can't think of any other safety towards the business end of the season that really helped IDP managers more down the stretch. 5 sacks, a forced fumble, 2 interceptions, 2 pass breakups in the last 7 games. That's just insane. But it's not why I like him for 2024, because we know, we'd be foolish to kind of expect him to continue to produce those big plays at the same rate. But what I am confident in is that he's going to have a much bigger role this year, starting out and hopefully throughout the whole season. Dan Campbell's been praising him, talking about his growth as a player. Tracy Walker's gone. Gardner Johnson left in free agency, and Branch seems to be the designated slot DB there. So, whether he'll finish top 10 or even top 20 at safety is unclear. As you say, there's quite a lot of turnover at the position. But I think he's got a shot to be productive this season and maybe deliver that breakout season that we're talking about tonight. Are you a fan, John?
Yeah, he's a fun one. I mean, and it obviously was a big play machine last year, like you said, right? Especially in the fantasy playoffs when it matters most. The guy came through in a big way and like added 14 tackles across those 3 games in the fantasy playoffs as well. Like, yeah, I don't think his big play rate is sustainable. Of course, he had the 3rd highest big play rate at his position in the league last year. But I'm with you in that, like, just, overall opportunity and for playing time and tackle production is going to come along with that, right? So he's a starter there as far as I'm kind of looking at this depth chart, along with Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph for, guys that are going to see safety snaps. And I think Branch he's going to continue in the slot, but I think from what I've been reading, like he's also going to get some box safety snaps, like in dime personnel, for example, which hot as hell for Brian Branch to keep that momentum going from last year as well, right? And then you got those back end safeties, which is, the Melifonwu and Kirby Joseph. They're the other guys there. So I could easily see one of them having a really nice year. And yeah, if I was going to pick between Melifonwu and Kirby Joseph, I do like Melifonwu a little bit better as well.
Yep.
Okay, I went with my defensive back here, who we also didn't really see that much of last year. Only became a full-time player later in the year, kind of like Fatu Melifonwu. But I went with DeMarco Hellams of the Atlanta Falcons. So I'll be curious what your take is on this one, Jase, because I think there's going to be a lot of people who are going to have no idea who the hell this guy is, because he only really started 3 games last year as a 7th round rookie. And despite coming out of Alabama, there wasn't even really that much hype on him to begin with in that draft class. And, part of that is that he clearly played kind of second fiddle to Jordan Battle at Alabama. He was the deep safety there as well. So it was nothing exciting for IDP purposes necessarily, but last year, Hellams took over for Richie Grant, who was the team's 2nd round rookie from 2021, where Grant kind of had his role changed from a full-time safety to more of a rotational piece down the stretch for whatever reason. He was great for IDP, Richie Grant, when he was in the lineup. He just, I guess, wasn't getting it done for the Falcons coaching staff, where they cut down his snaps quite a bit in favor of DeMarco Hellams, obviously. Now, it's a new coaching staff, so I don't know for sure, how Jimmy Lake, the new defensive coordinator there, is going to come in and deploy these safeties, Jesse Bates, DeMarco Hellams, Richie Grant, perhaps, if he's still on the team. Like, they may very well believe in Richie Grant still and put him back into a starting role, in which case we could throw the DeMarco Hellams breakout out the window. But I think, I'd prefer probably Richie Grant to get that role. If I'm being honest, I think, considering what he's shown for IDP already, but I just think it's very possible that this coaching staff also sees him similarly to the previous coaching staff, in that Grant maybe is just more of a rotational player who should be playing in a limited role. So we kind of saw that in his rookie year. Grant couldn't crack the starting lineup, played exclusively in the slot when he was there. And then this year again, where the team went away from him late in the year in favor of Hellams, right? So Hellams did grade a lot better across the board than Richie Grant, where Richie Grant's worst area play was the most important area of of play for a defensive back, which was his coverage, right? He ranked 97th in coverage grade last season among 101 qualifying safeties, with a putrid 42.4 coverage grade. So Helms at the very least was average with a 61.3 coverage grade, just, proving to not be a total liability. So again, I'll be curious what you think about this, because I could be reading it wrong. It could be a total toss-up. I like Grant for IDP. I hope it's him in a way, but my head says that the team is going to lean into Helms as the starter this year, along with Jesse Bates, obviously. And with the full season as a starter, that production is another one that will follow here for the potential breakout here, right?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I don't know if the team has made up their mind as to which guy. They kind of talked up Helms recently. Lake has also talked up Grant as well, though, and Grant's talked himself up. How much he likes the new scheme. Talked about how he's he'll get a shot and everyone's got a chance. The kind of things that a lot of players might talk about when a new DC comes in and installs a new scheme. So, I mean, my head says it should be Helms. I worry that it's going to be a split, but then what sort of role would you really want Grant doing? It's not like he excels in run defense. It's not like he excels in coverage. He's not a good tackler. I can't think why you'd play Grant over Helms on any snaps if I was in charge of that defense. God forbid. But yeah, I'm leaning towards Helms. Like you say, he kind of took over that role. Grant was absolutely terrible at times last season, and a new defensive coordinator coming in, he's not going to be oblivious to that. He would have seen games last year. He'll be reviewing that footage, unless he thinks he can get something. Jimmy Lake, this is get something more out of Grant than anybody else could, and there is that sort of way of thinking, isn't there, amongst these DCs sometimes. I've got to think it's going to be Helms.
It feels like it, right? I'm kind of with you there, like in that I just have a hard time with the coaches looking at Grant and his season last year and thinking that he can be a full-time player. Like I just picture him, if he's going to be playing, very much just like in a sub package role where maybe he's the third safety on the field, where he's being brought in blitz packages or being used up closer to the line of scrimmage, because I don't think you want him in coverage at this point. Like he kind of showed to be like that liability last year. So there's a lot of work to be done there, and I don't think coming out of camp is going to be enough of a confidence boost for what they see in him in practices to put him in actual NFL games just yet. So yeah, it's a tricky one for sure, but yeah, I'm with you. I feel like it's going to be Helms this year. So again, DB's a pain in the ass to figure out. So it was especially this year, and that's why I got DeMarco Helms on here.
They sure are. I'm kind of avoiding, if I'm honest, both guys, because there's a lot of DBs we can choose from. I don't really want to be picking up someone that could split role, could not play at all. It's probably a situation I'm looking to avoid for the most part. But like I say, Helms is my favorite of the two.
Yeah. For those super deep leagues, where you don't have to contend with a ton of other people, or where you do have to contend with a ton of other people to get those defensive backs on your roster, then that's one thing. But yeah, for more shallow leagues, we don't need to be looking at these guys necessarily here. But all right, linebacker time now. We each have a couple options here. We know that opportunity is the greatest asset for linebackers fantasy production, Jase. So a lot of our arguments for these guys is probably going to boil down to that a little bit. But either way, we'll pump their tires and show them some love. So who was your first breakout linebacker candidate for 2024?
Yeah, I'm really liking what Trenton Simpson could do this season. I think a lot of people are kind of getting on board this train, or have already been on board this train since Patrick Queen left. We know that we're probably going to see two full-time linebackers, even though there's a new DC in Zach Orr, because he's not going to, I don't think, want to change a lot. He's very young. He was part of that coaching staff that built that defense with Mike McDonald. So I think there's going to be a lot of consistency, a lot of carryover. Trenton Simpson, barely played any meaningful snaps last year outside of one game in week 18. Was really good in that one game, but I almost feel apologetic for mentioning it, because we can't really draw any conclusions from that game, right? But yeah, who else is there? Malik Harrison is really the only guy I think on the roster who could pose any sort of threat to Simpson. And I think we know who Harrison is at this point. We've seen him. He's going into his 5th year. I was thinking it was more like 3 or 4, but it's 5th year now, and it's become pretty obvious in the last 4 seasons. He's pretty limited in coverage. He has his struggles in that sense. Simpson appears to be the next man up, and it's encouraging to see a number of his teammates and Harbaugh as well talking about how hard Simpson's working, how good he looks. Harbaugh even described him. I think he was talking about his special team footwork, if I'm honest, but described him as perfect in some regards. But did also mention how some of that is some of his hard work and his improvement is kind of bleeding over into how he's playing on the defense as well. So, I mean, we try not to buy too much into this offseason speak from coaches and teammates even, but Harbaugh does strike me as the kind of guy that doesn't really praise guys who don't deserve it, right? So I think the question for Simpson is can he weather the obvious huge learning curve that he's going to be faced with and hold on to that full-time role, or will he struggle early and maybe lose that opportunity? I'm confident that he can play. I think he was a good player coming out. I was kind of interested in him at this point last year and surprised he went as low as he did in the NFL draft. So yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed, we see Simpson play those sort of 1,000 snaps plus this season and deliver big time.
Yeah, that would be amazing. And look, I mean, every day that goes by, I feel more and more confident about Simpson kind of taking on that LB2 role in Baltimore. People who followed me earlier this offseason will know that I was at least hesitant to kind of fully embrace Simpson because of the team bringing back a veteran that has more experience in their defense last year, Malik Harrison. So I guess, I don't know, because they did re-sign him in free agency. And so there's still like a part of me that is concerned about Harrison kind of surprising us as a starter or working his way in there. Like we've seen it before from NFL teams kind of preferring the experience over the hot rookies that IDP managers are excited about. But again, as we get closer to the season, like I do start to feel better about Trenton Simpson as kind of that heir apparent to Patrick Queen. Like I think he's capable of filling that role just based on kind of his versatility and athleticism coming out of college. And if that's the case, and he's playing 100% of snaps like Patrick Queen was next to Roquan Smith, then that's an easy smash breakout potential, right? Again, like there is the part of me that's worried about Harrison at least a little, even if it's not Harrison fully taking over that LB2 role. Like there's his experience with the defense and the chance that the coaching staff doesn't fully trust or embrace Simpson right away to play a full-time role. Like you kind of said, given kind of his lack of experience, where maybe we could see Harrison eat into some of the snaps at least. Like that's always a risk with any inexperienced linebacker, really, which pretty much all the breakout candidates are that we have on this list. They're all inexperienced. So just something for IDP managers, I guess, to be cognizant of before putting like a ton of stock into these linebackers, Trenton Simpson included, like just again, being a very replaceable position in the NFL. But I am absolutely with you. Trenton Simpson is on my breakout list as well. So I'm going to be hoping for the same kind of thing here, but there is like at least a part of me that, has some fear of Malik Harrison, which is a weird thing to say considering, like you said, Malik Harrison hasn't really done all that much in the NFL either.
Yeah.
All right, heading into our next linebacker breakout candidate, and another one with a big time opportunity ahead. I went with KJ Britt of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Britt goes from not having cracked even 50 defensive snaps in any of his first 2 seasons in the league, to barely hitting 160 this past year, to now potentially walking into like a 900 snap season because the team let Devin White walk in free agency and did literally nothing to address the position this offseason. They did luckily re-sign Levante David, or else they'd be doubly F there. But besides David, like the next most obvious man up is KJ Britt to me, who the team, I think, obviously feels confident enough in to have not done anything this offseason to provide insurance for losing White, who, a former first rounder. He averaged well over 900 snaps all 5 years that he was in the league for the Bucs. But the other side of that is that White was proven to be incredibly replaceable, arguably by any Joe Schmo linebacker, because of how poorly he played with those 900 plus snaps every single season. Like, he never earned a PFF grade in the regular season above 51.9, which at the time ranked 77th at his position. And that happened to be in his rookie year. He just never improved from what was like just a shit rookie season, especially considering that they spent the 5th overall pick on him. Like, Devin White's going to get chances in the NFL to prove himself, and maybe improves at some point. But bottom line, even from an IDP perspective, like, he was very easily replaceable. Consistently finished near the bottom of the league in tackles versus expected as well. But if KJ Britt now, comes in and is just average, like, he doesn't even have to be good, just average, he'll probably look like Levante David compared to Devin White for this coaching staff, and they'll be fine deploying him for just as many snaps this year, I'd imagine, and maybe even beyond if they can give him a cheap contract extension if he performs well or something this year. But I just don't think there's anybody else on this team that is going to step in and take that role. Like, Servassier Dennis was probably the closest competition, I thought, but he's also another former 5th round pick. Nothing overly exciting about him. And, KJ Britt, just another guy that has been in the defense for longer, even though he hasn't played like a lot of NFL snaps. He's at least been in practices, been in the meeting rooms for these many years to kind of know the defense a lot better. And all signs are pointing to him being the starter there in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, this looks like a good call. He was the clear favored option behind White and David when I think it was White missed time last year. I think David missed a game as well. Britt was the guy they turned to. But a question for you here, really, Johnny. How concerned should we be about Dennis, though? I think because maybe less so than I thought at first, perhaps because David's contract is up, I believe, and he's been talking about, or after this season, he's been talking about retirement as well. So I was just a little bit worried that if Britt didn't deliver on the level that we expect him to, would they start taking a look at Dennis? And I think that's less of a likelihood, considered the fact that, as you said, Dennis he wasn't like an early round pick. So I don't know. I'm less concerned about the idea that they might look elsewhere for linebacker help towards the end of the season if Britt doesn't perform than I was initially when I saw that. Not only is Britt out of contract this season, but I'm remembering that David is talking about retirement too. But otherwise, yeah, it looks like a good shout.
Yeah, it's everything I've read so far is said it's basically KJ Britt as far as kind of running the defense and everything like that, along with Levante David. But yeah, I thought Servassier Dennis would maybe be given a little bit more of a shot, but it seemed like pretty early on they were convinced that it was going to be KJ Britt that would be their starter there. And Dennis I think he got at least one start in last year when it was either White or Levante David that missed time, but there was another opportunity for him to start after that, and then they immediately went back to KJ Britt and just kind of. I don't think Servassier Dennis played more than 5 snaps in a game after that one game that he started. So it seems like he's maybe more of a kind of work in progress for them at this point. And yeah, like you said, maybe there's a potential for him after this year, after Levante David retires, if they don't bring back KJ Britt as well. So it's not like things are dead for Servassier Dennis, I don't think, for dynasty managers that maybe have him on a taxi squad or something like that. But I think just for redraft purposes, I wouldn't be looking at him other than maybe a waiver wire target if things go south for KJ Britt.
It was. I talked to Jeff on a pod last night, Jeff Pomazal over at the IDP show, about Britt, and I was kind of surprised to hear that they were talking about him as a leader on that defense, and that kind of works in his favor as a guy that could play all 3 downs.
Yeah.
They've got a lot of leaders on that defense. So for Britt to be mentioned alongside some of those guys was pretty telling, I think, and provides a lot of encouragement for him going into this season. So yeah, I'm with you. It looks like a good call. He looks like the clear favorite for me. for the season, to start the season and probably to end it as well. So good shout.
Nice. All right, let's talk about another linebacker here. Another one from your list, Jase. Going to a new team this year. It is Tyrel Dodson of the Seattle Seahawks. What do you like about him heading into 2024?
Yeah, no more Bobby Wagner, no more Jordan Brooks. This linebacker unit for the Seahawks is going to look really, really unfamiliar this year, isn't it? First time since 2011 that we haven't seen at least one of Wagner or Brooks starting at linebacker for Seattle, which is crazy. And it's going to take some getting used to see them, to not see them out there, I suppose. But to replace them, the Seahawks have signed Jerome Baker and Tyrel Dodson, both on 1 year, we think, prove-it deals. We kind of know who Baker is. He's been a starter for, 5 or 6 years. But Dodson is much of a lesser-known quantity, I believe. You saw a glimpse into what he's capable of last season for the Bills. He was handed a bigger role after the injury to Matt Milano. Granted, Dodson wasn't perfect. He missed too many tackles at times, but he played far better than expected in run defense and had some real standout games in coverage too. So I like his talent and his potential. Thinking about how he's going to be used, again, we've got Zach Orr going to be the play caller for the. No, that's not Zach Orr. Sorry, John. We'll have to scrub this bit.
Zach Orr. Aiden Durd,
right. Aiden Durd,
your countryman there, Aiden Durd.
Yeah, that's right. So thinking about how he's going to be used, I think he'll be put in position to make the plays. I'm surprised to see Dodson going as late in drafts as he is. Don't know if you've been keeping up with the ADP of the IDP show in those best ball drafts, but he's going as the LB58, and that to me is really low. Just screams value for a guy who could be and should be a full-time starter, I think, in the league this year. One spot behind Dayan Henley, which again, this is crazy company for someone who I think is going to be a full-time guy. So what's your thoughts, John?
Yeah, I mean, I'm absolutely right there with you. He's on my list as well, because this is like a defense for him that where it's going to be primed for tackle potential within that linebacker position, right? Like we don't know exactly what the defense is going to look like scheme wise, like you said, with Aiden Durd coming in. Mike McDonald as the head coach, but you look at the roster, the other linebacker options, it's a pretty barren unit, right? Where Jerome Baker, Tyrel Dodson, clearly the guys that they're going to have to rely on and start every single week. It's funny. You mentioned Bobby Wagner. I saw a headline from, I think it was Sports Illustrated, and I try not to overreact to headlines, but this one really made me laugh because it was such an unreasonable shout that it said, "Can Tyrel Dodson fill Bobby Wagner's shoes?" But I don't know. I'm sorry. Like I I like Tyrel Dodson. I think he's good. He was good last year, but he's not coming in to be Bobby Wagner, who was a future Hall of Famer and Seahawks legend. I think that was just silly. But I don't expect him even to deliver like the Wagner levels of tackle production. But like that doesn't mean he can't be a good, reliable IDP who we will be saying we were right that he had a breakout season by the end of the year because of that opportunity for playing time alone, right? And I think he's going to be, like you said, close to an every down player in that defense where, if his snaps are at least close to Jerome Baker's, who I'll probably give the edge to, at least for playing time right now, just as a more proven NFL linebacker. Like if Tyrel Dodson's snaps are close to him, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Dodson actually outperforms Baker for IDP this year either. Like people know I'm not a Jerome Baker fan. He's an inefficient tackler. He's a kind of a big play merchant, and those are few and far between at this point in his career. So, again, he'll probably need to be a near every down player for that to happen. But I don't think the team's going to have really any other choice but to deploy him as that, given kind of their lack of options on their defense right now. So, I'm 100% with you in choosing Tyrel Dodson for a breakout year.
Yeah, there was some low level buzz about Jon Rattigan at one point, but I am really not. I think he was only running with the ones because both Dodson and Baker were injured. So I think we can pretty much safely say it's safe to ignore any talk about John Rattigan starting at linebacker for the Seahawks this year. Tyrese Knight may be for dynasty purposes, but not this year.
Yeah. No, let's hope we don't have to see John Rattigan as the starter here over Tyrell Dodson. I know linebacker can be stinky at times, but at least Tyrell Dodson, like, he really graded well last year. He kind of earned this 1-year contract here to be a potential starter. So hopefully he can take it and run with it. We'll see how things shake out.
Yep.
All right, let's go on to our last breakout name on the list for today. And I wanted to put this one last because it's not often that we get to talk about a 6th-year, 29-year-old breakout. But here we are, because I'm going with EJ Speed of the Indianapolis Colts, and really similar to my pick with KJ Britt, not just because they have similar first name initials, KJ and EJ, but also because they're stepping in for like these old IDP vets, Britt coming in for Devin White, and Speed coming in for the artist formerly known as Darius Shaquille Leonard. And you know, we actually got quite a bit already last year from EJ Speed. He came in, you know, as the kind of full-time starter in week 12 of last season when he took over for Shaquille Leonard when the team released him. I think it was after week 10. And he was good. He flashed IDP potential, especially into the final 4 games of the year in the fantasy playoffs. I think it was week 15 to 17. And then even 18, he had all 4 of the double-digit tackle games for his entire career over that 4-game stretch. And I am noticing, like, because of those 4 games specifically, I've seen some pretty significant recency bias towards Speed and against Zaire Franklin as of late. But I think it's important to keep in mind that this, you know, it's exactly what it is. It's a recency bias, right? Because he had games with snaps where he could have delivered double-digit tackles previously in the year, including 5 other games where he played at least 45 defensive snaps, but he didn't. And then that's why, you know, you'll see EJ Speed's tackles versus expected numbers for those watching on the YouTube as negative 3.4 for the season, which is just about expected for a player in his role. It's not like a bad thing or a good thing. It's just right around where he should have been. He's not like this amazing overperformer, even if the last 4 games of the season showed that, right? It's a small sample size. So I do ask that people, you know, don't fade Zaire Franklin because of that, or in favor of Speed or anything. Like, I don't think we should be doing that. Franklin's still ranked very highly for me heading into this year. I do expect him to outproduce Speed on the year as a whole, but that doesn't mean that I don't like EJ Speed either. You know, there's going to be weeks where he does potentially outperform Zaire Franklin, just based on the playing time alone. And then, yeah, for a breakout season, just being a full-time starter for the entire year. He was LB 44 in points per game last year, LB 37 in overall points. I'd bet on a much better outcome on a full complement of snaps here in 2024, and then kind of qualify him as one of those breakout candidates for this season.
Yeah, you pretty much nailed it right there. There's a lot to like about Speed this year. Again, that sort of continuity as well. The coaching level, Gus Bradley is back for his 3rd year. We know that he loves playing those 2 full-time off-ball linebackers. No Shaq Leonard, as you mentioned, to confuse the situation any longer. He left quite early into last season, in fact. And there's very little competition behind them, behind Franklin and Speed on the depth chart. So I know Ronnie Harrison saw some time at linebacker last season, but he was kind of used more as a safety towards the end of the year when Julian Blackman was out, and Harrison's only game with significant snaps at linebacker was when Speed was unavailable. So yeah, I'm all in on Speed. If I've got one slight nagging doubt, there was some games where he and this is probably a little unfair, where he missed a whole bunch of tackles, you know, in a single game, three or more in three games last season, which doesn't look great when you look at it. But when you look at how many tackles he had in those 3 games, it kind of alleviates some of those concerns for me. So yeah, probably unfair of me to mention that at all. He's getting drafted as a low-end LB3. I see on this in those IDP show best ball drafts, which is really bizarre. I think he's got the opportunity to outperform that by some margin.
Yeah, I think it's a fair expectation for him, right? But yeah, like you said, there's going to be those games where, yeah, he misses tackles. He's not like a perfect player. He's as much as he's a 6th-year player heading into this season, like he's relatively inexperienced as well, right? So there's going to be some growing pains. And again, I just caution people looking at that 4-game sample to close out the year. Holy shit, he was this amazing performer down the stretch, and that's what he's going to be all year long. I wouldn't expect that from him, but like again, full-time snaps in that defense. There's definitely going to be IDP potential there. So that's what we like about him for a breakout candidate for this season.
For sure.
But yeah, that's going to wrap up our 2024 IDP breakouts. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and I look forward to watching all of our picks hit this season. We expect nothing less than a 100% success rate, Jase. So for that to actually come to fruition, make sure you all like and subscribe for good karma. Most importantly, do so just to say thank you to the legend Jase Abbey for me. Jase. Can't thank you enough for coming on here in the dead of night over there in the UK to talk breakout IDPs with me, man. It always means a lot, and it's always great getting to chat with you again.
Absolutely, my pleasure, John. Going over, as I said at the top, breakouts one of my favorite topics at this point in the season. We've done this a couple of years in a row now. Going over these with you is just a lot of fun. And the thing I like with you is even if we don't. We're not in complete agreement on a player, which is rare, because we both look for kind of similar things in these guys. You always offer some insight, which kind of makes me want to revisit my evaluation. So I always learn something doing these. And I want to say, while I'm on, I've mentioned this to you off this pod, but your expected sacks pod where you talked about you had a couple of times where you talked about it, but the defensive lineman ranking one that I heard the other day was really top notch. So if anyone's not following you, subscribing, then they're in a world of hurt this year.
Oh, I appreciate that, man. And yeah, the feeling is mutual. That's why I love getting you on here and getting to talk IDP, because I learned from you as well, right? You're digging into the numbers and see things that maybe I don't see, right? And know things that I don't know. So it's always good getting you on here and getting your insight and knowledge into the game. So I'm sure hopefully the listeners appreciate it just as much as I do. So please, before you do go, remind everybody where they could find more of you and your work as well.
Yeah, so I'm going to be getting into some pretty cool projects involving video shorts with the IDP show this year. That'll be kicking off from next week. Really looking forward to that, and I'll be involved in some season-long article series over at DLF, and I've also got my top 250 dynasty rankings and my rookie rankings over there as well.
Awesome. Yes, definitely be on the lookout for that. We could all use more Jase Abbey in our lives and to help us grow our IDP knowledge as well. And then as for me, I'll be writing up 3 IDP breakout articles for defensive line, linebacker, and defensive back that next week, I guess it'll be now at this point. So even covering some names that we didn't cover today. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. And then I'll be back next week in the podcast feed or the YouTube feed, continuing to look at the 2024 IDP rankings. We did defensive line last week, like Jay said. And then next week, it's time to turn our attention to the defensive backs. So until then, peace out.